The first sound that split 2 years of silence at the Meridian wasn't a therapist's prompt or some miracle technique. It was a maid's low hum winding through salt air and jacaranda shade. And a 6-year-old who hadn't spoken since the crash turned her head. You know what I mean? Just a fraction. But enough to make a CEO freeze like he'd heard a market collapse coming for his name. Ethan Caldwell arrived armored in a charcoal suit, a carry-on of plans and numbers. And that brittle hope money buys when it's run out of things to fix. Lily stood beside the luggage like a small moon with its light turned inward, pretty dress, quiet eyes, nothing leaking out. At breakfast, he narrated waffles and strawberries the way he narrated quarterly reports, steady, reasonable, useless. While the aquarium glass glowed and the garden spilled color across the terraces, and a housekeeper named Ava wiped tables like she was listening to the room breathe. He noticed her because she noticed Lily. Not with pity, not with that adult flinch people do around grief, but with this steady gardener's attention. Then she disappeared, and the humming floated back from the service corridor, and later, down in the garden where halved stone paths held the ocean like a framed painting. Ava reappeared in work clothes and set a red origami crane on a bench as if leaving a breadcrumb for a voice to follow home. Ethan bristled when she spoke. Silence has meaning, she said. And he shot back that Lily couldn't speak. There's a difference. But he felt something unknit inside because the woman didn't blink or sell him comfort. She just watered roses and let the koi surface in soft ripples. Let me back up a sec, because the pressure wasn't only inside a small child's chest. It was also in every notification pinging Ethan's phone. Marcus calling about the Steinberg deal wobbling and the not-so-subtle news that Victor Hayes, the rival who tried to gut his company 2 years back, had moved his reservation up, was coincidentally hosting a children's wellness fundraiser on site. Ethan's jaw set in that particular CEO way, which is to say nothing changed on his face while everything in him braced for impact. And somewhere between spreadsheets and strategy, he glanced from his balcony and saw Ava place another red crane on that stone bench. Like a signal flare only one person would understand. Morning came wrapped in fog. Lily pressed a sketchbook to her chest and drifted to the pond. Ava sprinkled facts as lightly as seed. Koi track red. It means food, safety, and Lily reached for her pencils, red first. Ethan almost said don't waste your time, and then remembered he'd already said it yesterday, and the world had not improved. The general manager whispered that Victor wanted a meeting, denied, then mentioned that he'd invited Steinberg to breakfast. Yeah, that happened. And Ethan walked toward the restaurant ready to take a punch in public. Inside, Victor smiled the way knives do, implied leadership drift and personal distractions. And then, one of those movie beats you'd call convenient if life weren't sometimes this precise. Ava passed with a tray, stumbled just enough for water to christen Victor's $1,000 tie. Jim Steinberg stood faster than outrage, took the blame with a decent lie, and the room exhaled. Ethan clocked it wasn't clumsy. It was a pressure valve pulled at the exact PSI. And when he stepped into the garden later, he found Lily ringed by finches Ava had coaxed with seed, still as a prayer, eyes tracking wings, and Mr. Winters the groundskeeper murmured that some kids speak bird long before they speak people. At dawn the next day, Ava tipped her chin toward the sky. Monarchs, 7:30. They never stay long. And Ethan did the hardest thing he'd done in 2 years. He left his phone upstairs, walked out with nothing but Lily's hand. The air turned to stained glass as orange wings flooded the garden. A butterfly rested on Lily's shoulder, another on his sleeve, and she breathed one word. Daddy, quiet as tide foam, huge as a verdict. He didn't grab for more, didn't clap or cry out, just nodded like a man who'd been given a fragile artifact to hold. Later at dusk, she said Ava, and when he reached for his phone to document it. Ava covered the screen with 2 fingers and said, let's make this moment hers. Victor's gala rose from a ballroom like a stage built to flatter the rich into thinking they were brave. Voices for Tomorrow shone on the backdrop. He spoke about trust and showed an old courthouse photo of Ava draped in a blanket, ash in her hair, the burned husk of Hayes Tower behind her. He said questions remain. He implied uncooperative, and the room went still in that ugly way rumor makes it still. May I? Ava asked. And the general manager handed her the mic like it was heavier than it looked. 5 years ago, she said, Hayes Tower carried 17 safety violations, alarms dead, exits painted shut, sprinklers mute, documented and ignored. I pulled out a 7-year-old named Kesha. She didn't speak for 6 months. We hummed while we waited for her voice to trust the world again. You have no proof, Victor snapped, and a prosecutor on vacation raised a hand from the back. Court records, Your Honor's name. Ruling of negligence. Then a teenage girl stepped forward in a server's uniform and said, That's me. I'm Kesha. Miss Ava saved me, and then she stayed, and the quiet that followed wasn't neutral. It leaned hard, and from a chair near the side aisle a small voice rose. Stop. Lily stood on the cushion. Crane clutched white-knuckled. Said it again. Stop being mean. And something brittle cracked across the room. Applause started ragged, then caught like dry brush. The general manager called security with hotel-polite firmness. Maya waved tablet footage of a bribe in the executive lounge. The prosecutor added that Victor's charity registration had been revoked 2 years ago. And the man who loved microphones had to walk out past a 6-year-old who'd remembered how to aim the simplest word at a bully. The deal with Steinberg unfroze by dinner the next night. Not because of strategy, but because the truth has a way of unclogging pipes you thought you needed a wrench for. Ethan told Marcus to set up a real foundation from his personal funds. Trauma-informed education. Kids who lose their words. Tripled whatever the hotel paid Ava if she'd consult. And Patricia, the GM, invited Ava to design a program here. Mornings in the garden, quiet hours, no pressure, just invitations. Ava hesitated. She liked honest work where a missed sweep doesn't scar a child. So Patricia said write your own job description, and Kesha asked to help on weekends. Lived experience counts. And the first Saturday felt like a soft opening for a different kind of luxury. Parents exhaled for the first time in months. Kids hovered at the pond without anyone asking them to perform. Lily became a peer mentor by accident, telling a boy named James how to scatter pellets so the smallest fish still get some. Said the garden helped her remember the shape of words. Said she still liked silence, just not the kind that trapped. Ethan sat nearby with a paper newspaper because muscle memory is slow to change. Hearing himself ask fewer questions with answers baked in, doing less on purpose, discovering that less can be a discipline, not a surrender, Mr. Winters rolled past with mulch and said beginnings are delicate things, they need weather and time. Ava nodded and hummed the same tune she'd hummed that first morning. The one that doesn't tell a child what to do. It just says I'm here while you choose. Some afternoons the past walked in uninvited. The red scarf returned in Lily's drawings. Not choking a memory anymore, but woven into wings like a thing transformed by being looked at gently. Ethan told Ava the part he'd never said out loud. The scarf caught in the wreckage. The bird outside the window. The impossible math of blame kids do to keep the world from feeling random. And Ava said children always take the bill for events they didn't order. Our job is to slide it back to the universe with a tip of patience. You know what I mean? The line landed. They let quiet do its work. 8 weeks on, the hotel's reputation shifted in a way a brand deck can't manufacture. Bookings rose because people heard this was a place where families weren't a problem to be managed, but a story to be hosted. Victo. Ours assets started funding survivor programs through court orders. That part made strangers on the internet call it poetic justice. Ethan called it math finally correcting itself. Steinberg added ethics clauses with teeth to the merger paperwork. Maya ran Chicago without him and didn't break a sweat. The team learned he'd been doing too much for too long, because control feels like love until you realize love sometimes looks like putting your phone in a drawer and watching a butterfly land on your kid's sleeve. And then a simple Saturday, sun like clean glass, the koi fat and shameless. The paths smelling of cut rose and wet stone. Lily traced the worn circles on the carved bench and asked if her mother would be proud. Ethan said yes in a way that made the air gentler around them. Ava switched from program clipboard back to pruning shears because she still liked ending her day with tasks that finished. Lily called across the path. Will you tell the bird story at closing circle if I do the bird voices? And Ava said only if you take the hard lines, the high notes, the parts that scare you first. And Lily grinned like a dare had been accepted. They got ice cream before lunch because order is a suggestion when you're building a new life. Strawberry for her, chocolate for him. And they ate it looking at a Pacific that didn't care about mergers or scandal, just kept breathing in and out like the world remembering itself. Sometimes Lily talked, sometimes she hummed. Sometimes she wedged silence between them like a comfortable pillow, and Ethan understood all three as fluent. The red crane lived on her nightstand and in Kesha's pocket and on a bench where a humming started the day. And if you listened closely, you could hear how a voice returns, not in a cinematic swell, not permanently, but in these ordinary crescendos that add up to something like home. So tell me, what's the line between mercy and accountability when power tries to weaponize a child's pain? Who gets to define help? Whose voice gets the mic? And what would you have done in that ballroom when a billionaire went hunting a maid's past? Would you have clapped, stood, spoken? Yeah. This is where I ask you to choose. Drop your take below on right and wrong, on justice and community, on how we show up for the quietest people in the room. Because sometimes the smallest word, offered at the right frequency, can shatter glass and let the air in.